Okay, it's got it. It's come up.
Jim, are you on?
Hi, this is James Watson.
Hey, guys.
Oh, hey, Jim.
Hey, I'm so sorry. James, are you on?
Yes, I am. You ready to go?
I'm sorry about that. I had my network is blocked. I'm going to start it up right now, okay?
I'll jump it off.
Okay.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by Index Engines and DocuLabs. We are talking today about bridging the gap between data and policy. Index Engines is a software technology firm that focuses on data profiling and information management solutions. And DocuLabs is a strategic consulting firm that helps clients develop policy and build processes and methodologies around litigation readiness and managing data much more effectively across the infrastructure. I am one of the presenters today. My name is Jim again. I'm Vice President of Marketing with Index Engines, and I will be going through the session today with James Watson, who is the CEO and founder of DocuLabs. And maybe, James, you can do a quick introduction of yourself.
Thanks, Jim. Welcome, everyone. DocuLabs has been focused on the information lifecycle governance and records and information management market for almost 20 years now. So we're going to use this time together to share some of our perspectives on what's working and, more importantly, what's not working in the marketplace today.
Yes, and we look forward to presenting today with DocuLabs and showing you how we can help your organization manage data much more effectively. As everybody knows on this call, unstructured data growth is exploding throughout the corporate data centers. It's at an all-time high. A lot of the organizations have really just been increasing their storage capacities and adding servers and so on to keep up with this growth.
it in these circumstances. And eventually the guys that, in the IT department, they don't own the data. They own the infrastructure that the data sits on. They cannot make decisions on what to keep and get rid of. And because the get rid of scenario is so complicated, the default is keep everything, unfortunately, forever. And really, I think until we've bridged that gap, and some of it is, really a communications challenge, but we think about practical solutions that both sides of the table can come to agreement on, is when you're going to see fundamental change.
Yeah, exactly. And, they're keeping not only one copy of everything forever, they're keeping dozens of copies of everything forever. So the problem is just getting expanded and just growing significantly beyond an area where people can even get started. They get analysis paralysis and don't even know where to begin. There's just so much content that exists out there. So here's some stats, I think, James. These are from DocuLabs, and I think these are fascinating. And I think based on your years of experience, you have some great knowledge here about the profile of what exists on typical networks. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, so the data you're looking at is expressed as ranges, and it's based on DocuLab's work with over 30 different clients where we've had the opportunity to crawl the network drives or the shared drives, whatever term you use. This is NAS storage, generally under-policed or not policed at all. So we break the analysis down into 3 different categories. We think about preservation, what we might have an obligation to store for record-keeping reasons. We think about, are there unnecessary file types, duplicates or near duplicates. Unnecessary file types is probably the easiest to go after. We've created a list of, exact file extensions that typically most organizations would say, yeah, we don't need these types of files on our shared drives. And anywhere from 10 to 20+%, but I would say, low teens is typically what we see. This will depend a great deal on whether there's been some cleanup done in the past. If you think about the next category, the risk table, depending on your industry, files with personally identifiable information or certain keywords that would denote a classification or confidentiality. It might be you'd see that anywhere from 3 to files themselves carry an implied risk, and this is something that's very much concerning to compliance officers, and many of you are probably actively using various tools, data loss prevention type tools to crawl content, but it's generally done with a very limited approach. So if you expand that and think about all the different keywords, insightful analysis, and then the aging is the last piece of the puzzle. Of course, there's many other variables, but the implication is files that are very old or files that have not been touched for long periods of time have little value to the firm. They may or may not have value. Perhaps we move them to less expensive storage mediums. We move them into the cloud. We archive them at lower value. If you go forward one more slide here, I think for those of you, I think advance it for me, will you, Jim?
You looking at the current state of data policy slide, or?
I've not seen that one yet, but that's the one I'd like.
Yeah, I did. We're having some network issues. I apologize for the attendees today.
Well, let's go with it anyway. So what we do is we really are trying to think about content in 3 buckets. We have official records or records of the firm, which we need to treat with records, but referential information, stuff that's valuable for us to do our jobs, but not necessarily an official record. We would call that reference material. And then we have everything else, which could range from transitory or temporal. This PowerPoint, for example, something you might want to look at for a short period of time. It could be the soccer schedule that my wife sends. Those 3 buckets, there's certain actions we'll need to take. The official records typically will want to move someplace with more permanence, particularly for a regulated industry. There might be worm requirements. For referential material, we might say move it into SharePoint, but we'll put an expiration date on it. We'll know that in general, reference material might only be a 3-year retention, and then everything else we might just leave in place for now, but tag it as such, saying that in 3 years it'll go away. And what we've got here is the opportunity to start the clock ticking. We might not be able to dispose of these very significant portions of the content today, but we've got a precedent now. We've started that process in which, after a period of time, we will be in a position where we can dispose of content.
James, a question on, excuse me, on most of the clients you deal with. I imagine for different types of industries, whether you're pharmaceutical or financial services or government, these numbers change, or are they fairly consistent across different types of organizations?
I think they definitely change depending by industry type. And as you see here, depending on function within an organization. But I would say, depending on how narrow or broad your records retention schedule is, how many categories of records, roughly about 1 in 10 is an official record that has, real ramifications. About a third is what we've seen has some sort of a business process implication, or is important for getting the job done, or might need to be pulled up years from now because we've got a project similar to the one we did, 5 years ago. And a little bit over half is worthless. And that's just loosely defined. Of that half that's worthless, as I showed you previously, somewhere between 10 and 15% is true garbage, meaning you could get rid of it today without having to have any concern around policy or somebody getting having a heart attack if this were to go away. General rules of thumb.
Yeah. And are you seeing companies interested in deleting data, or is there still that fear of, if I delete stuff, I may be, deleting stuff that's, under legal hold or anything like that? I mean, do you think there's enough knowledge and capability now of the data that people can implement defensible deletion processes without any concerns?
I think there's absolutely concern over disposition in today's market. And many organizations have not got to the point where they're disposing. But what you can do is prevent migrating unneeded data to the next greatest platform. You can, limit access. You can put it on less expensive platforms, and perhaps, start that dialogue that 3 years from now that we will be able to dispose. You can't clean up 20 years worth of mess, in a year or two. It's going to take us many years to get this done. But if you chip away at it, maybe you get rid of temporary files. I don't think anybody's going to complain if you swept for temp files and disposed of those, or at least stage them for 90 days and then dispose of them.
Yeah, or we have customers just looking at the redundant content that's clearly a duplicate of what already exists out there. That's the kind of stuff that's easy to make decisions about, or even you mentioned the cloud earlier, moving it offline to much less expensive storage and getting it out of the network. Where it can get into the wrong hands, get through a data, undergo a data breach. There's all sorts of strategies, I guess, that exist that, beyond deletion, that can help protect data.
The next slide is really talks about the financial implications. I think for all of us, we have a fiscal responsibility to our employers to look and bring forward projects that have real tangible financial benefit. And if they don't, we shouldn't be in the ring asking for money to go do something because it's a pet project. And this is one of the exciting things when you think about that growth that Jim highlighted for us at the beginning. And in this simple little table, I've got an organization with 2 petabytes of unstructured content. I grow that volume at 30% per year, and then I reduce the cost of storage, which starts at $5 million a petabyte. I reduced that cost of storage by 20% a year. I wrap all those variables together, I walk you out 5 years, and you see that for a fairly small footprint, and many of you on the phone have significantly more storage tied up with, with unstructured content. There's a $30 million plus savings, and I haven't even, you haven't even talked about risk or litigation or eDiscovery, which is the other big financial driver for many of you. So there's a conversation here. Timing is everything, I would offer. If the CIO is about to write a big check to refresh the platform, that's a great time to have this conversation. If they just went and bought a whole bunch of storage and they're all set for the next 2 or 3 years, those dollars are sunk and there's no way to get them back. So it's important that you come in at the right time when the organization might be in the process of spending real cash dollars.
Yeah, we often hear all the time when we start getting involved with data profiling projects and deal with the data center folks, it's like, well, I could just add storage. It's only $1,000 a terabyte or whatever the cost of per terabyte storage is these days. But clearly, you need to look at the whole picture, and $5 million and growing per petabyte is a significant corporate expense that may not be needed. And I think if the records and the policy folks can develop sound policies to organize and manage the data and feed those policies to the IT organizations, I think again that collaboration between those two organizations could face not even tapping into the risk and liability containment. So we mentioned slides to move forward. So we mentioned about developing policies in the organization, and I know the use of metadata is critical to do so. So I think metadata is going to be able to allow you to develop reports and queries to be able to understand what exists out there. And in order to use metadata to define policies, you can focus on specific areas like departmental data, date ranges. I mean, a lot of people are keeping content that's way outside of maybe a 7-year retention period, especially when you start dealing with legacy tapes or data that's on just older servers. And then using metadata to determine disposition. And we mentioned defensible deletion, archiving, cloud storage, securing it. And we have a lot of companies we deal with that have encryption requirements for sensitive data that may contain PI or data that contains customer information should be encrypted. And not only doing the disposition, but auditing that network content. So we have a customer that had a legal situation years ago where they had sensitive content that was discovered in PSTs on users' desktops. They had a very strict email archiving policy in place, and the policy in place kind of purged email after a period of time, so they felt that they were protected and the email was being managed properly. But users were able to create PSTs, which they did, and stored them on desktops. And lo and behold, a sensitive email that did not help their case was found in a PST on a executive's desktop and submitted to the courts, and it didn't help them with the case. So what we ended up doing was, what they ended up doing was creating a policy that the IT organization locked down desktops from creating PSTs and protected users from doing so. So they felt like no PSTs are being created, we're fine. We did an audit across their network using data profiling and found they had over 14,000 PSTs scattered about. So the policy existed, they felt they were protected, but it wasn't being implemented properly. So I think that's where using these analysis tools and profiling tools allow you to understand. And metadata is going to be your roadmap to be able to build this infrastructure that can manage the disposition of the content. One of the examples here with the index engines platform I wanted to talk about is if you were looking at, this is just a high-level example, if you were looking at, say, manage aged office files from the marketing group. And the reason I'm using that example is it's very specific, but it shows you the flexibility of the data profiling tools. You basically can point to different locations, from file servers to things like SharePoint to legacy tapes that may contain content that's relevant to that specific query. And then you can, point to, in this case, I'm just going to point to a specific file server. You can run a filter saying, I just want to find any member of the marketing group. So we can leverage things like Active Directory on your network, saying, anybody that's a member of the Active Directory marketing group, I want to filter on that content. And then you can filter by things like Office documents. In this case, it could be anything. It could be email or PSTs or other content. And then you can get reports that show me when this content was last accessed. So the thing here you can see in this example is that a large bulk of it, 61% of it, in fact, hasn't been accessed in more than 5 years. So that's the kind of information and insight that metadata provides that allows you to make decisions on the content. So if you do that, you can go in there and say, I want to take all that data or that result set, and I want to migrate it to maybe a cloud storage environment. I don't want to get rid of it, but I don't want to keep it on the online network, or migrate it to a new platform that's less expensive to save IT budgets, or just, if you're at the point where you can go through defensible deletion process, as James mentioned, you may not be there today, but you may be there in 5 years, implement that, maybe get it to the cloud and say in 3 years, if no one requests any of this data, we can delete this content. So I think, I see over and over again is that the challenge here really is not the technology and not the process and the people and so on. It's really the collaboration between legal and IT that's creating, and the records organization that's creating a huge gap that companies face. There's no common language. We constantly get the point or the issues from the data center and IT organization is, well, the legal and policy people can't tell me what I need to keep. And then when you talk to the legal and policy folks, it's like, well, the IT organization can't tell us what we have. So it's kind of they're at, at a brick wall, on opposite sides of a brick wall, not being able to make any progress. So I think there's really no common language that exists to make sense of the chaos of data. And without that understanding, you can't really, you're stuck. You can't create these policies. And I know, James, at DocuLabs, you guys are dealing with this situation every day. What's your opinion about this level of collaboration?
Yeah, I think building a policy but making it actionable, these are two different things. And if you advance forward, the next slide talks about, is it legally defensible? Well, the courts have still not weighed in on exactly what they expect, but we can predict from what we've learned with electronic discovery that if we have a rigorous process, if it's consistently followed and it's repeatable, that is very much something that would be deemed reasonable. So whatever your process may be, and we've built these processes for lots of firms. As long as you're doing it again and again consistently, that's what I think is going to win the day. And so I would encourage you to, spend the time taking your policy and then put it into action. What does it mean? And elaborating on whatever that process may be. If you think about what we've shared so far, we've talked about the kind of the digital landfill and cleaning up the past. And for some of you, you'll start that process. You'll begin to get people excited about the opportunity to properly codify information, keeping and retaining that which is of value, and perhaps disposing of that which isn't. If you think about the day forward opportunity as well, oftentimes the simple, quickest win, and if you could go forward one, Jim, when you think about content that's either received tomorrow or created tomorrow, there's some simple things you can do to keep from propagating this mess. So we can make declarations. We can provide user guidelines that say, we'll give you your personal space, but recognize it's for these purposes. We can make the shared drives read-only and say that, everything from today forward is, if you need it, go get it, but then put it in a content management system when you save it, and give us at least a minimal set of metadata, that which we can use to drive some retention periods. Look forward to social collaboration sites and social content that might be in use throughout your organization, and make recommendations on how that content will live or perish at the appropriate time. These sorts of activities will keep the pile from growing, so to speak. It'll allow us to implement the discipline and kind of the document hygiene that we lacked when we first installed our Novell networks in 1993. We've got the chance to do that now with many of the systems coming online. Whether you're you're using a cloud tool, you're using SharePoint, whatever the case may be, this is your chance, quote unquote, to do it right. So I'd offer up that as a potential for some quick wins. In the end, whatever plan you come up with, and define the cost, the benefits, the resources that are required. As you think about different examples and ways to communicate, here's an example of one, Jim, if you go forward. And we think that many of our clients benefit from articulating their plans in a multifaceted approach. Let's go to the where do you start slide.
Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties. I know. Thanks for bearing with us, but yeah. Go back to that slide, James. If you wanted to talk about that.
We just wanted to show you an example. This one's tough to read. Let's do the where to start.
Yeah, so I think, I know organizations such as DocuLabs are helping clients through this process, but I think one of the questions we constantly get in creating, creating a more viable policy and records management environment is where do you start? And I think, start small. I mean, you can't boil the ocean, and we see a lot of companies facing the analysis paralysis of, just talking about it and not getting anything done because they just have no idea where to start. And I think some of your expertise at DocuLabs allows you to help companies understand where the highest risk data is and where the biggest impact environment would be. But I think, the challenge is get buy-in across the organization, develop a project that's achievable and measurable and reportable so that you can report on the success. And as people start, and as we implement data profiling projects and people start seeing their data and understanding it, with knowledge comes power, and the power to actually take action on this content. And the best organizations to get this done are ones that collaborate and work as a team within the data center as well as the policy and business side of the house to solve the problem. And I think DocuLabs as a partner of Index Engines is well suited to help clients with this process. And maybe, James, you can talk about some of the magic you guys do with your clients to make headway in this space.
Yeah, I'd echo that advice that start small, chunk it up, show the chance to show demonstrable results in a short period of time is really the name of the game in today's environment. And these sorts of initiatives really afford us that opportunity. We can take a single department and go through some of what you've seen here. You could take a division. You could take a cluster of servers. You could look at certain content types and just narrow in on that and get people comfortable with disposing of iTunes libraries. Whatever the case may be, I think there are lots of opportunities to start small and build momentum, and that's really where we see the success start from.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. And I think one of the questions that came in is kind of tied to this. I don't know if we've addressed it yet, saying, what is there an area that you guys usually start in as far as a department or a type of data or a repository to kind of give people a direction? I mean, do you have any insight into that, James?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a specific department is generally industry dependent. What you're looking for is the kind of people in the department that are enthusiastic, that they're tired of the clutter, that they're conscientious, about using corporate resources in an appropriate manner. They're not information hoarders, so it's almost easier to pick departments that don't fit that profile. But compliance functions, some of the time records reports into compliance, internal audit, accounting, finance functions tend to be more organized than marketing and sales, and perhaps a good place to build some wins. You're not going to have this probably as strong as statistics because they are much tighter, but I think they buy into some of the principles very quickly. So whatever the case may be, I think the people part of the equation is the most important, getting people that are enthusiastic.
Yeah, we've seen also that you can use the profiling to kind of pick specific repositories. Email is always a big pain point for a lot of organizations, whether it be PSTs or in the email database, or possibly email that's contained in SharePoint or content like that. You can even look at date ranges. Content that's about 2 years old versus content that's more than 7 years old, or content owned by specific groups or so on. So I think there's a lot of knowledge in the industry from folks like Doculabs as well as Metadata profiling that can help you point you in the right direction. But it doesn't stop you from profiling the data and getting educated on what exists. And I think again with that understanding, you can start making some of those decisions. And if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to chime in and hit the chat button or the question button that's on your right side. But one of the other questions is it's been very difficult for our organization to get funding for these types of projects. Any advice on how to justify the costs? And I think what we've seen is if you're trying to justify the cost, I think some of the expenses that companies spend in, say, storing legacy backup tapes at offsite storage or buying new storage capacity and so on, a lot of those expenses could be reduced significantly. And we've seen companies, save millions and billions of dollars a year by cleaning up data, moving it to less expensive storage, moving it to the cloud, maybe cleaning up legacy content. So the data center folks have a lot of skin in the game here in terms of cleaning this up. So if you're speaking with your IT organization saying that you need help with these projects, explaining to them and showing them the payback and the cost reductions that they will see is one way that we see a lot of excitement generated about these projects, and the CIO or the folks that are spending that budget can reclaim a lot of that expense. James, do you have any other insight into that?
Yeah, a couple suggestions, two in particular. First, I think to build a compelling business case, you need to school yourself in the art of IT cost accounting. As Jim had said, a petabyte of storage, the variable cost, the stuff you pay the vendor to buy the spinning disks, might just be $1 million of the $5 million. The rest of the cost is in backup, infrastructure to support it, the servers it's connected to. So there are lots of indirect costs that may or may not be accounted for in different ways in different organizations. So you need to get either friendly with an IT finance person or take the time to learn how your organization is allocating costs. But eventually, if you use industry metrics like the ones we've quoted, I think that's a pretty sound starting point. The second thing is management is looking for a proof positive. So data profiling tools like Index Engine, no matter how small your sample, is a start. You can say, see, here's the analysis we ran on Department X or across these gigabytes or terabytes, and we found these results. That's irrefutable. We can show them, and you might even do it in their department, and they'll go, yeah, I'm one of the culprits. And you get their buy-in, they'll start to see it and believe it, and then it just grows from there. So understand the financial side of things, and then demonstrate proof positive that we've got things that nobody, no how, no way, needs to hold on to.
Yeah. Another question from the audience. This one's a little bit long, but I think it's right up your alley, James. It says, why not classify and attach retention to these objects per information type if you have a retention schedule? We have temporary and permanent keeping periods for our records. I agree few records categories are permanent, but I find use or lack thereof to be a very risky proposition for disposition. My other concern is that often records content and context is often stripped out from these reports, which really hides the value and ability to appraise the record. I am concerned about the defense of this type of disposition process as a value-based record, information, appraisal, and disposition. Does that kind of activity undermine the extension of one's records retention schedule?
It is a mouthful. Let me try. I think the idea of crawling for record worthiness is valuable, but you need to be guarded in terms of the investment level. Meaning, we can't, in certain circumstances, in certain use cases, we'll spend a lot of money identifying records and moving them to the right places. In other situations, such as on the shared drives, where we maybe our default perspective on the shared drives is there aren't any records there, or the few that are there, the users could probably move if we gave them 90 days to do it, and then we'll assume the rest is garbage. So you're kind of walking in perspective, and a lot of it has to do with kind of the corporate history and how the shared drives were used. You know, did people think of them as the record system, in which case you're going to find lots of records and you probably want to be a lot more careful? Or were there other record-keeping systems, and the shared drives were really just the digital landfill? It'll probably vary in different departments. It'll vary with, how sensitive you are to the potential of deleting records. And those are, healthy questions to have right up front before you begin the effort.
Yep. Agreed. So we're pretty much at our time limit today. And I have on the screen there both my information at Index Engines and James's contact information at DocuLabs. We both have a number of white papers. We have papers on data profiling. I know James has papers around DocuLabs processes that are on their website. We also have this slide deck. We're happy to send you the slide deck for your review. I know there's a number of great stats in there. And I hopefully recorded today's session, so I can send a link to the recording out to anybody that missed it or you want to share it with. So James, if you just want to wrap up, we can shut it down for today.
Yeah, please, I would invite you to borrow any of the slides and the stats. You're welcome to do that. And if you're looking for more detail, there are a number of resources, in particular a couple of business case calculators on our website that are very popular. So I encourage you to go there and download them.
Okay, thank you everybody for your time today, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future. Have a good